Hello and welcome everyone. Today is Tuesday, February 21st, and this is the special meeting with executive session of the Litchfield Governing Board. Oh, I didn't hear me repeat myself. Okay. First up on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we're going to have a moment of silent reflection. Okay, thank you. Next up on the agenda, we're going to do recognitions and celebrations.
Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning, members in the audience. Today we are recognizing our community partners, specifically our community partners at Summit Church. As we all know that we take safety as a top priority in our school district and many other school districts. We put together Superintendent Gunning along with our other district partners in Agua Fria and Avondale Elementary School District came together and put together a very large summit in a short amount of time. We were scrambling for a place to be able to host at least a couple hundred people with breakout rooms and we were kind of in a pinch, and our partners at Summit Community Church stepped up to the occasion and offered very graciously to allow us to use their tremendous facility. I mean, it was an amazing event. If we could take a few minutes, I'd like to play a short video for you all. For those online, you can see the video on our YouTube channel. If you scroll down to the videos on down below the existing meeting.
Today we are at the West Valley School Safety Summit.
Hold on. There we go. There we go.
Today we are at the Southwest Valley School Safety Summit, and it's our first annual, and we're hoping for many, many more to really come together as police, fire, schools, city officials to talk and discuss safety, to ensure that our schools in the West Valley and the Southwest Valley in Arizona are the safest schools in the nation. Got it right here.
Last year, right around the time that we had the terrible tragedy at Superintendent Gunning in Litchfield, Superintendent Hargrove at Avondale, and I got together and said, how can we work together as a tri-district coalition to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our kids safe?
I'm extremely excited about our summit today. This is bringing all of our first responders, law enforcement, and all of our leaders of our schools in the Southwest Valley together so that we can be the experts to ensure that we have safe environments for all of our children each and every day.
No, you're not. Really, teach them what to do. What is required?
Our Freedom High School superintendent reached out to Litchfield and Avondale last summer and asked to get together to have a conversation around safety and how we can work together as a larger community to be able to support our children, to make sure our families know that we are focused on making sure that our students and our staff and our community are safe.
The biggest lesson today has been partnerships and relationships that we need to build before any incidents do occur.
What's really been an awesome experience, learning alongside our experts in education, from partners in law enforcement, basically all of the elements it takes to really ensure that our schools are safe.
So there's just a little sample of what happened on that day. It was a lot of learning, a lot of collaboration, and we're definitely moving in the direction of creating the safest environment for our staff and students possible. I'd like to also recognize our executive director, Megan Duplain. She was very instrumental in putting this entire event together. So would you like to add any current words?
It was an amazing day. We had over 200 people there from across a bunch of districts, city officials, police, fire, and we had 7 breakout sessions, a keynote. We had time for each jurisdiction to sit across the table from each other, schools, fire, police, get to know each other, start talking through some problems so that we could have. So we start kind of getting on the same page with our language and our expectations of each other. It was a really, really incredible experience. All of our chiefs were there talking with our superintendents and other leaders. We had a great panel. I know you saw that, of experts that were able to answer some hard questions, difficult questions, and just getting to know each other in a different way. We believe we can start down the path of just bumping our practices to the next level so that we avoid any issues that other places have had in tragedies because they weren't talking with police or we didn't have systematic plans in place. And what an incredible place it would be if every one of our districts in the Southwest Valley had the same procedures so that we can talk with each other and learn from each other. So that's what we're going for. And the next step of this is that we will meet April 26th. So the trust has different consortiums in the state of Arizona, and this coalition that we created will make up the West Valley Consortium. So starting April 26th will be our first quarterly meeting where we will continue this dialogue, have speakers, continue us meeting together to move forward with our developing the most up-to-date evidence-based practices for safety.
So there you go. This is a really growing very quickly. And like I said, we are going to create the safest learning environments for our staff and students. So with that, I would really like to celebrate the partners that really made this all possible. Our partners at Jennifer Eastman and the pastor and the entire team at Summit Community Church.
I just want to say that was a phenomenal event that was put on. Megan Duplain, you and all the people you worked with put on an incredible event. I learned a lot as a parent, as a board member, as a community member. I will say one of the biggest takeaways that I took that day is our district is really nailing it. Like, yes, obviously we can always do better and improve, but we really have been taking all the steps we need to take and moving in the right direction. So I was really proud of our district. And as we learned new things, I realized, oh, we're doing that. Oh, we're doing that. So I think we're definitely headed the right direction. And that's because we have an amazing team that's making sure that we're staying safe. So I appreciate all of the work that you guys did, but thank you guys for putting that on.
Just make one more quick comment. I think this is another example, and Sam, I know you've done a good job. We've been sort of fostering these relationships with faith-based partners and community businesses and people around our community that allow us to, whether it's use space or use resources or whatever that we might not have available to us. So kudos to you guys for using that collaboration, in tandem with a lot of different partners. And it was a phenomenal event. I think anyone that attended would walk away from that thinking, not only do we have our head on straight and we know what we need to learn and we're going to the right place to get it. And I think those are two really important things. We're never going to do everything right, but we're looking forward and we're moving in that direction. And I think that's, all we can ask right now is these things are constantly changing, but it seems like we have the right people in the room and the right people at the table. So kudos to you guys.
Before we move on to presentations, which are next on the agenda, as a point of order, I would like to possibly have us move public comment to before our presentations, just so that if they have comments about one of our presentations, we can hear them prior to our discussions. In order to do that, I would need a motion to move public comment to now.
Okay, I move that we rearrange the agenda and move the public comment to 3B.
I second.
Okay, having a first and a second, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Mr. Honak,
Yay.
Ms. Moran,
Yay.
and I'm a yay, so motion passes, and we will now do public comment. I'm going to call up we only have one person speaking, so I'll call them up and then I'll read the disclaimer. So our speaker today is going to be Kelly Jordan. While you're walking up. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, this agenda item provides an open call to the public, allowing individuals to address the governing board on any issue within the jurisdiction of the board. Items not listed on the agenda may be brought to the governing board's attention under this section of the agenda. Due to the open meeting law, Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot discuss or take any action on items not listed on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, response to public comment about matters not appearing on the agenda will be limited to individual board members who may ask staff to study the matter, respond to any criticism, or ask that the matter be put on a future agenda for further consideration and decision at a later date. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and no more than 30 minutes will be devoted to the public comment portion of the agenda. When you approach the podium, please state your name for the record.
Kelly Jordan. First, let me begin by saying that I understand there are larger issues on the table this evening. But after sending an email to Superintendent Gunning, Dr. Ducey, and the board, I felt it was important to attend and let my feelings be seen and heard in person. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kelly Jordan, and I've taught at Palm Valley for the last 16 years as their physical education teacher. The purpose behind the email that I sent was to bring a voice to the special areas, which is often felt very unheard, or we often feel unheard. We do not have a department head or an instructional coach to help guide us. So that type of relationship is essential for us to be part of the important conversations and decision-making in this district. Special areas are tired of being put on the back burner. We're tired of being an afterthought and at times not even thought of. In my letter, I asked that the board consider having all special area staff become certified teachers like many of our surrounding districts. This would improve the quality of education across the board, fix the inequities from our schools or from school to school, and help with the retention of the teachers in special areas. Knowing that the budget is a concern, I would still want to know that the district I love and that I serve intends to move in the right direction. So with that being said, I also proposed a second option of moving classified areas to full-time with benefits. This would allow them adequate planning time and benefits with hopes that we can retain quality staffing. As an advocate for physical education, a teacher, a community member, and a mom, I urge that you do what's best for the students by looking at special areas that we offer, the classes we offer in the district, the instructional time our students actually have in these classes, and truly weigh the benefits of what this could look like for our students and our school district. What we teach may be different, but different does not mean less. When we know better, we're supposed to do better, and we've known better for quite some time. The research has been there. We know the benefits of these programs. Special areas provide unique opportunities that many students do not get a chance to have in their gen ed classes. It allows for increased motor development, decision-making, social interactions, team building, creativity, inventiveness, all of which are tied to improved academic performance. And now as a district, we need to choose what is best for all of our students. That was it. But I can keep going for 30 seconds because that's what I do. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, next up on the agenda is going to be our winter 2022-2023 district assessment update presentation from Brian Owen.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the governing board, and Madam Superintendent. We just wanted to provide an update on a couple of things going on this year in the district. One is we just had a new district data point, so we'd like to go over that data briefly. And then we want to give you an update about how the Illuminate implementation has been going for half of this year so far. I'm Brian Owen. You want this instead? Yeah. I am Brian Owen, Director of Assessment and Accountability for the Litchfield Elementary School District. I always like to just point out what our major initiatives and focuses are in the assessment department and how those align to our pillars of success in those first couple of slides. First, just to recap what's happened so far district-wide with math and reading benchmarks. We administered fall benchmark at the very beginning of the school year. The first month, that was grades K through 8 in math, 2 through 8 in reading. Those were all new assessments. All of those assessments were created in Illuminate with the Illuminate item bank, and they were all administered in Illuminate except for some paper assessments in grades first and second grades. Then we just administered a winter benchmark last month that really just got finalized about 2 weeks ago, but grades 2 through 8 math and reading all administered online except for a few scattered paper assessments. We use some old content. So all of the reading assessments were actually taken from former reading assessments, and we use some new content in math. So we tried to use as much current content or old content that we had. And really the reason we want to do that is because I don't want to reserve too much of the Illuminate item bank content because that keeps the teachers from using that content. And we had a lot of items, so I wanted to use as much of that as possible. Let's look at what the data look like. This is the overall average percent correct in math and reading by grade.
Brian, before you get started, I'm sorry, can you
Certainly.
just clarify, we have this conversation every year, but I feel like we just need to say it again before we go through all these numbers. When you're talking about a benchmark in the beginning of the year, the benchmark is measuring, I mean, the test has items on it that kids may learn throughout the year. Correct.
Yep.
So they're not expected to get 100% because they haven't learned some of that information yet.
Correct.
That's in the fall. In the winter, how does that align? Is that the same concept there, that this is still through the entire end of the year, or this is only items that they should have learned up to this point?
In reading, it is a grade level blueprinted benchmark. In math, it is not. This particular math assessment is aligned to the standards pacing guide.
Okay.
And it was through the month of December. So the content and the standards that were on those math tests were standards that should have been taught through December.
Okay.
From the beginning.
Okay. Reading is a full year. Math was just based on the pacing guide, so should have been taught through December. Got it. Thank you.
Correct. Here's how the student demographic groups compare to one another. In math. And here's reading. You can see comparisons look similar group to group on both assessments. And because most of this content is new at this time of year, we don't really have a comparison point. And so I don't compare percent correct now to any percent correct in the past. But what I wanted to do was see if I could get some kind of an idea of about from August to basically now through January, are we seeing some progress? So the way I do that in this particular analysis is I want to compare the percent proficient from the fall assessment to the winter assessment in both math and reading. And the proficiency cut points were set using similar methodologies. So what I'm looking for here is, am I seeing movement across the distribution from the way the distribution looked in the fall to the way it looks in the winter? This is how it looks overall by grade in math and reading. Two areas that really jump out at me is 5th grade math. It looks like there was quite a big jump between the fall and the winter, which to me is interesting because we just saw a really large increase from 2021 to 2022 on the state math assessment in 5th grade. The other area that I'm interested in is 8th grade math. I also wanted to look by student group. Are we seeing the demographic groups move across the distribution? This is math. And here's how it looks in reading. It looks very similar to math. So to me, when I look at this comparison, in general, overall, I do see movement from the fall to the winter this first half year.
Mr. Owen,
Yes.
if people have questions about that, since we're going to move to Illuminate in a minute, would you rather them ask questions about that data first and then?
Sure, yes,
Okay.
that would work.
Mr. Honak, did you have any questions about the first part that's on the data that's been presented so far?
Yes, I do. I noticed right away the 8th grade math, and that is incredibly important because that's our final product going to high school. So it sure looks nice that it's gone up significantly, and 5th grade also, but that's very significant. I think the 8th grade, and pardon me, but Illuminate, that's our new math program, right? That we spent a lot of money on. Is that correct?
No,
Or not?
Illuminate system. Oh, sorry to interrupt, Member Honak. The Illuminate system is the new data and assessment system that replaced and
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. But what is the name of the math program? I'm embarrassed. I should know that. The new math system.
that's called iReady.
iReady. So is it correct to assume that we perhaps are seeing some benefits from iReady with the because it just appears to me that the improvements in math are much more significant than reading, which wasn't so problematical. Math needed more help. Is that because of iReady, do you think?
Well, I definitely think it could have had an impact. I don't know necessarily that it's due only to or specifically to the implementation of iReady, but it can be said iReady was implemented and has been used, and we do see increases in the first 4 months of the school year, 4.5 months.
Yeah, no, I think that's excellent. And I'm not attributing it to just iReady. I know it's a lot of work and a lot of focus. And I'm that first, when I saw the 8th grade improvement, I believe that a lot of effort has been, I don't have any evidence. I just have a very strong hunch that Litchfield's been doing a good job increasing the math scores.
which were very well needed. So I'm a happy camper over here from the standpoint of performance. If these numbers are, you know, authentic, I know they're authentic. Nobody's doing anything, but if they are a good reflection, I think they are. So I think it's awesome news, and that the good efforts and the iReady. So thank you for straightening me out.
Welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Miranda, do you have any questions about the data presented so far?
No, no questions on the benchmarks.
Okay. Ms. Clymer,
No questions for me either.
Mr. Owens?
I don't know if I have any questions per se. I don't think anybody can look at these numbers and honestly be happy with them though, right?
They're an improvement.
I mean, yeah, improvement, but still.
It's going in the right direction, but I agree with you. No, we need to keep going, but a good start is a job half done, you know. At least we're heading in the right direction. So, but I agree. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have any questions.
I don't have any questions right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And for the second part of this presentation, I just want to give an update about what we've done so far to implement the Illuminate system. It is a very large system, and it's a large scale implementation. We're doing this district-wide and replacing two systems actually that were in place for 13 years prior to this. So the data that I just reported is data that I put together, and I do that outside of Illuminate. I don't put together my district summaries in Illuminate. That's done offline in a database. But I want to show you what the teachers can see after the students test, and all the school staff can see. I'm going to just show you some screenshots of the reports. These are pre-built reports, and these are sort of the major reports and the most widely used reports you can see across the top of the screen. This is the overview screen. Gives you just a general overview, average percent correct. It says mastered and not mastered. That's proficient, not proficient. And then the counts and percentages for each of the 5 proficiency categories that we define. Then I'd like to go through each of the next 4 major reports that are pre-built that people have access to. This is I think they call it the gap report, achievement gap report. And I like the way they put this one together. This shows the difference between the average percent correct in the student group and the average percent correct for students not in that student group. So if this showed 0, that would mean that the group was scoring the same as the students not in the group. So you can see the red means the students in those groups are scoring lower than students not in those groups, and the green means the students in those groups are scoring higher, and by that much. So that's one report. Here's another pre-built report. This is just a response distribution. This will show in order really the percent correct for each item, so that we can see what the lowest scoring items were. And this is district-wide. So teachers would see their students that they're rostered to. School level can see teachers' grades. This is a standards performance report. This is mastered and not mastered individual standards. Sometimes this is one item, and sometimes this is maybe 3 or 4 items that are aggregated together. The mastery cut point is default. It's set at 80% or above. And then this report is actually my favorite report, probably the most widely used because I've trained on it the most. This has the most information, I think. This will show by student and by item. And then in this particular report, I group it by standard, how each student scored on each individual item, the overall standard. And we'll give the students answer if it's a multiple choice question. Green is a student answered correct, red, student answered incorrect. And also, you can click on the item number on top and the item will show up so that they can see what that item looked like. That's really useful if they have multiple items that measure the same standard that have vastly different percentages correct. They can see the difference between the two items and why a high percentage might get one correct and a low percentage another. That could be the difference between addition and subtraction, say, same standard. And then if they just click on the reports, it'll take them to a list of reports. There are 34 pre-built reports associated with these assessments. This is just a screenshot of some of them. So those are the pre-built reports. And right now I've just shown you a lot of district level data, but we've always had district tests. So we've had them ever since I've been here, which has been a long time. I think the major component of this system that we've implemented this year that we've never had before is the ability for teachers to create their own assessments. So this is just a screenshot of a teacher's account and the assessments that have been created. I think this particular account, there were, I want to say 18 or 19 assessments. Just to give you an idea about the usage, this is actually old now because I took this screenshot a couple of weeks ago. You can see there are 300 assessments that have data. So there have been 300 assessments created in here and administered to students. So just to give you an idea of what we've done, the two major pieces of implementation were make sure we have district assessments in Illuminate and they can be administered, make sure people have been trained on how to read at least the major pre-built reports and teach them how to create their own assessments. We looked at usage reports. All schools have created assessments, some more than others, but all have. We've also been able to incorporate other data sets outside of Illuminate. For example, Acadian's data is in Illuminate. Of course, the state, the AASA, AZSI data, and Azella data are all in Illuminate. So our next steps, we're working on the automation with the math program iReady. And my next areas of learning are I want to figure out how to start creating custom reports so I can train on that, and creating custom data import templates. And we are in talks to do some kind of training over the summer for staff. So that is where we are mid-year so far.
Thank you. I'll just go down the line and see if anybody has questions now on the Illuminate section. Ms. Clymer?
Just one question, based on this implementation update, I know we're on year one, we're going to get better, we're going to do more, obviously over time. This is never a, hit a home run in the first year. Based on the feedback that you've received to date, and I know it's limited because we're only halfway through the year, but do you think that this is going to be something that, not only as a district, we are going to get teachers and instructional coaches, et cetera, to embrace and continue to learn more of, about, and sort of create what we thought in the beginning was sort of be this district-wide resource that people are going to be able to kind of use back and forth. Do you see it going in that direction just in the short time, or is there anything that we need to do to sort of tweak our protocols or our best practices to help them want to utilize it more?
I do think it's going that direction. I think in terms of that, my next thing is just more training. So I think there are some schools that dove right into this immediately and they love it. They do it every week in every team meeting and PLC meeting. They're looking at that data and looking at these assessments and analyzing them. I think the next step is when each of the individual schools get ready is more detailed training for them.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Owens, did you have questions?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I hope that this, like Board Member Clymer, I hope this provides the opportunity for teachers to assess and evaluate more effectively so we can see that growth. Thank you.
Ms. Moran, did you have any questions about Illuminate?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a couple of comments, just to reiterate a little bit. I do think that the pre-built reporting is really impressive. And I know in some of the school showcases that I've been to this year, I have seen those reports in use. And various of our campus leaders have shown us how they are using that feedback from Illuminate to make those decisions, as you said, Director Owen. And also to reiterate, I think the training is super important to increase the comfort level and the knowledge of how the reports and the data can be used. I'm glad to hear that some of our campuses have jumped right in and maybe even surpassed or been working with you, Director Owen, on the reports and what they're finding useful. But I do think that having training for everyone is just going to hopefully open their eyes to how they can make their lives easier, and then also use that data to be more impactful to student success. So thank you for the patience. And I know this is a change and a big change from what we've had in the past, but hopefully we are heading in the right direction. And I'm excited to see more and more of these reports being used and hear about how our campuses are utilizing the data.
Thank you. Mr. Honak, did you have any questions about the Illuminate portion of this presentation?
Yes, I did. First, I have a question. Was the technical implementation of it, was it relatively smooth? Because I remember that there were some challenges. So I'm just kind of curious, how did that go? Was that relatively go according to plan?
In general, the issues are very minute. It's getting a certain demographic group to report just because of the way. So it's tricky because I'm the middle person. Well, we are as a district, we're the middle person between the Illuminate system that receives the data and the EduPoint system that gives them the data. And so we don't know exactly what that code looks like that's pulling data out of EduPoint, but we know that it's not showing up correctly in Illuminate. So a lot of that, since the first implementation, has just been cleaning up small rostering issues, student demographic flags, and working with both to try to get those cleaned up. But in general, yes.
Thank you. That was a good explanation. And then the pre-built reports, the thing that was, when you get to the training and getting teachers on board that are already, don't want to be, they get a lot on their plate to learn things. But are the pre-built reports being customized to focus really on the main needs in such a way that the training would actually be more just explaining a turnkey process? Does that question make sense?
I think so. The pre-built reports, the ones that I showed tonight, are the ones I showed screenshots of. Those are the most major reports and the most widely used reports. And I think that those give sort of the best information for teachers to use right away. I have not done, that's kind of my next step in implementation and learning about this system, custom built reports. That's my next step, is to start to dabble in that. I know that a couple of people have, but I haven't really gotten into that to train how teachers can go in and pull different columns from different data sets into single reports. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I don't think that most teachers are going to want to do that, but if there's feedback, in a way that, in other words, rather than just inventing a new report, but taking a report and you adding the columns or things that are more focused to, say, certain teachers, and then to have them avoid having to really learn how to modify reports. I think that's what I'm kind of saying.
Oh, I see. That is my plan. Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like it's really on track. Sounds good. Thank you.
For me, I'm glad to see that this is going as well as we were hoping it would go, because we knew it was a big undertaking, and we know we've thrown a lot of teachers, and we appreciate that they keep trucking along and getting through it. But I feel like this is going to overall make their workload less at some point. But I'm hoping if somebody can explain, how can teachers take these reports, say they've got this data that gives them lots of information. Maybe this is a Dr. Doozy question because we had talked about this before. And kind of addressing what Mr. Owens said about how can we be happy about these scores? What can teachers do with this data now that helps us move forward towards the end of the year so that we can see more growth?
Yes, so I'm going to have Director Owen focus on the report that I have up on the screen here. So this report is very helpful for those next steps. So specifically, teams through the PLC process have been coming together and looking at this report. And I know it's hard to see at the top, but each question is linked to that standard as well as the percent correct. So teams are looking at that percent correct, looking at what they've really taught in depth. Some mathematical or reading practices are going to continue to build. So for instance, they might be working on single and double digit addition and moving to, more difficult problems, word problems, things like that. So with those calculation skills. So from this report, they're able to see patterns for that class, and they're able to see, okay, what is this telling us as far as what errors the students had and what we need to go back and reteach either as part of tier 1. And what tier 1 is actually what happens in the classroom for all the students, or what happens in tier 2, which is identifying maybe a smaller group of students that needs extra intervention with these skills, or drilling down to maybe tier 3 students that need even smaller group with our specialist to receive reteach, or maybe being taught in a different way, or a lower skill that might be preventing them from getting that higher skill. So that's the way they can use this data, is to look for those trends in their planning for how they're going to sequence what's next for the rest of this year.
Thank you for that. That was my only question. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood how this information can be used to help us to grow as we move forward this year. So I think it's a wonderful program. I'm glad it's working out well. And we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is budget planning discussion for 23-24. And this is going to be led by Mr. Vaughn and Ms. Reichs.
Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning, colleagues and community, thank you for joining me tonight to discuss the district's budget for the 2023-2024 school year. Tonight, I will provide a legislative update, a recap of the January study session, and address board member requests from the last study session. Director of Human Resources Reichs will provide a preview of staff education materials on high deductible health plan. We will also discuss the potential of an employee appreciation benefit from ESSER, district provided cell phones, and some additional stipend requests. Similar to our last study session, we will pause periodically for discussion and questions to help give structure to tonight's discussion. The aggregate expenditure limit was lifted for the current year since the last study session. This helps protect the district's reserves for next year, but it's important to remember that these are single year fixes, and the district will be facing the same uncertainty this time next year. As a reminder, at our last study session, we presented a proposal that would have the district needing to identify between $3.1 and $3.2 million of budget cuts by 2026 to balance the budget. I'll briefly recap what was included in that recommendation. The initial recommendation included 2% base compensation increases consistent with the compensation study performed by Jeremy Kaez from True Professional Consulting, new position requests, and position change requests, as well as increased costs of medical benefits passed to employees, but maintaining the high deductible health care plan as a free option for eligible employees. This is a slide from the last study session. I've included it here to show the $3.1 million of spending above reoccurring revenues in 2026. You can see that in the bottom column or bottom row under the 2026 column. We'll need to identify those cuts between the 2025 and 2026 school year. This slide, also from the last study session, shows our reserves and why we believe we can support the recommendation through 2026. Under the current plan, our reserves would dip below the 26% lower limit previously discussed with the governing board in 2026. This shows that we can support the current plan through then, but we'll need to balance the budget by then to protect the district's reserve levels. It's important to note that any additions to the administrative recommendation will increase the amount needed to be cut in coming years. Within the recommendation, we included continuing the temporary grade level aides for K through 3 and 6th grade, as well as contracted guest teachers previously added. Later in the presentation, we will provide some data around these positions. However, it's important to note that one of the reasons administration is recommending continuing these roles into next year is to allow more time to gather data around their effectiveness. Included in the new position requests are several special education positions that are largely designed to keep the programs running at designated class sizes due to student need. With the increased caseload, we've also included an additional assistant director of special education who would assist in ensuring a focus on compliance and training for the increased special education staff and site level principals, teachers, and students, with the ultimate goal being increasing student achievement for these students. This slide shows a summary of SPED revenues received against the projected spending for fiscal year 2023. This data shows that the district does not receive enough revenues to support special education operations. However, this is not an issue that's specific to Litchfield. This is a statewide issue. It's important to remember that we are required to provide free and appropriate public education to these students. Our SPED department puts in significant effort to do so effectively and efficiently as possible. Since the 2012 school year, the number of students with IEPs has grown 54%, and we've not added any administrator level support for special education in that time. This is a recap of the other new position requests that were included in the administrative recommendation. I'll pause just for a second just so we can look at those. This slide summarizes the position changes included in the original administrative recommendation. So these aren't new positions, but recommended changes to existing positions. I'll now open it up for discussion and questions related to our recap of the last study session. And if you'd like me to go to a slide, I'll be happy to.
Okay, Ms. Clymer, did you have questions on the first part?
No, I don't have any questions on the recap.
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask probably a rookie question here. The lower limit, the 26%, and then the reserves midpoint target at 30%. Who determines that standard or that's, that practice, that standard average?
So great question. Earlier in the fiscal year, I did a presentation that went through industry level recommendations from professional groups as well as peer comparisons to try to guide us to having those sorts of targets. Previous to this year, we haven't had those sorts of targets. I'd be happy to go through that presentation with you at some point, but just broadly, that's where it comes from, as a earlier discussion the governing board had this year around reserve levels.
Yeah, I think I remember it. I either watched it online or attended in person. What is the average for most school districts? And is that what you found to be about normal, 26%?
When I looked at similar districts that had good financial standing with the people that look at bond ratings and things like that, which are similar to a school district's credit rating. If you are going to put it on a personal perspective, our targets are right around where those districts fell. The 26% actually comes from the lowest recommended level from the Governmental Finance Officers Association, which is a national level professional association that puts out guidance on those sorts of things.
For school districts.
For school districts as well as state and local governments.
Okay.
So cities, municipalities, states.
Cool, thank you.
Of course.
Ms. Moran, did you have questions on this first part?
I do. Executive Director Vaughn, do you have any idea when looking at the special education funding slide, do you have any idea how our program for the funding and expenses, meaning the deficit of 775,000 and then the transportation deficit of almost 500,000. Do you have any idea how that compares, not as a dollar amount, but as a percentage to the total programming of any of the other districts in our area? Or are we about in line, or do we know that information?
I don't know it for sure. What I know of other district special education operations compared to ours, I would guess that we have a smaller deficit than similar school districts. That's largely because we outplace a significantly smaller proportion of our students, and outplacement to specialized special education schools is significantly more expensive than providing that education in-house. But that's just what I would believe to be the case if I did the analysis. I've not done that analysis.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question on this section.
Mr. Honak, did you have any questions on this first part?
No questions. Good report.
Yes, Mr. Owens, go ahead.
Sorry, just based on what Board Member Moran said. So basically, the special education funding, that's math real quick, $1.2 million of unfunded mandates.
Yes. Okay. That's a very succinct way to put that slide.
Yes, it is. I don't have any questions at this point, but you're absolutely accurate in that special education is a lot of unfunded mandates, so.
We'll now move on to discussing base compensation increases for fiscal year 2024. This slide shows historical base raises for an experienced teacher calculated to include all components of base compensation as recommended by the compensation study. As you can see, a 2% raise is consistent with historical practice. In 2023, we were able to support a higher increase, but this was because of the additional state revenues we received for last year. The board also requested the cost of an additional 1% compensation increase. This slide shows the additional one-year cost of that option. Considering the cost of providing raises on this additional compensation in the coming years, if the district were to provide 3% base raises as opposed to 2%, we would be looking at cutting $3.8 million to $3.9 million from the budget in 2026, as opposed to the $3.2 million previously presented. At this time, I'd like to open it up for discussion around base compensation increases for next year.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any comments or questions here?
I don't really have any questions. I think we're gonna get into more of this later in the presentation, but I think it's it's hard to look at these numbers and feel like they're adequate. And I know we have the same conversation every year, but I do think that as we look at the cost of additional base increases, whether it's just 0.5% or 1%, and we look at that and we say, gosh, $600,000 is a lot of money. And then over time, it's, going to compound. But we have other programs that basically cost this amount as well. So I really think that we have to start looking at the budget a little more holistically and say, okay, if we're going to do XYZ, we're giving up ABC and back and forth. So I'd like to just keep that in mind. I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but there are other programs that we are doing that I think we really need to look at whether these programs are successful and really be able to evaluate whether they're positions or programs or initiatives or what have you. Are they worth giving up this for that? So I just want to put that out there, and we'll talk more about what those programs are as we go through the budget.
Mr. Owens. Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I agree with what Board Member Clymer said. It's as much as we want to, in this case, specifically pay more, we want to give more of a pay raise. It's challenging to do that, knowing that we're just going to have to cut something, whether that's pay or positions or programs that may be impacting student success in a positive way down the road. So I agree, we need more evaluation, and I understand that that's supposedly coming next year, but it's challenging that we don't have more answers and more analysis on our systems today. So it's challenging to make these long-term decisions when we don't have the data that's really needed to evaluate those.
Mr. Honak.
I kind of agree with everything everybody said. My question is just from your personal gut feeling, not definitive. Are we kicking the can down the road, or do you think we're balancing things out? Because it's never going to be perfect or even maybe good, because there's so many compromises. But just overall, I just have this lingering feeling of, are we kicking the can down the road? And I'm not sure that's a bad thing, because things will happen that will make it better. But so if my question doesn't make any sense, just say can't answer. That's it.
Member Honak, was your question directed at me?
Yes, Mr. Vaughn. Yeah, just because you're the guy that's really doing it. So we're relying on you, at least I am. And so just looking at the overall situation, do you think that we're overall doing a pretty good balance, or are we being a little reckless in kicking the can down the road that we're going to have big trouble in 25 or something?
I believe the administrative recommendation is a good balance of kicking the can down the road and providing us more time to do that analysis. I do get worried about some of the other items that we'll discuss tonight that potentially have significant costs if we add too many of those on top. My hope is, shortly after we get this budget figured out, I will immediately start working on the 2025 and 2026 budgets to begin prioritizing what those cuts may be, that will then hopefully allow us to begin gathering more robust data on those potential cuts next school year. So my hope is that by kicking the can down the road, if you will, is really just giving us a couple of months to get better situated, to have more data, to make those better decisions in the future. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And it sounds like what you're describing is kind of a financially healthy process. So it answered my question. Thank you.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I do kind of want to point out with us talking about this 2% raise and how there's been a lot of feedback, right? Like there's other districts that are doing these bigger raises than we're doing. But we already pay more than a lot of those districts that are doing those bigger raises. So while your raise might not be the same percentage, you still can be making more money working here than you might be making working at another district. So I think that's important for our staff and our community to keep in mind when they're looking at, oh, it's just 2%. And we have done some pretty significant raises in the past, which weren't shown in here. So I think that's unfortunate because you saw these smaller numbers. But we have had some years where we've had very significant raises. So I think that's important to keep that in mind when we are looking at what we're trying to do now to be more fiscally responsible while still giving people raises, while trying to keep all these new programs in place that we implemented, that we can either have all these programs or we can have more money for the people that want to not, if we don't have the programs, we can cut some of them and then give teachers more money, I guess, but that's not necessarily what we want to do because that's not necessarily what's best for kids. So that's my only comment.
To build on that, if you'll allow me, the compensation study was done looking at other surrounding school districts, and the 2% compensation increase recommendation was designed to keep us competitive. So you're exactly right. Some other school districts in surrounding areas may need to give more to try to catch up, but we're in a solid position where we don't have as much ground to catch up. And so that's where that 2% recommendation from the independent consultant is coming from.
I would also point out that there's been a lot of stuff said, and I'm pretty sure they said it in that presentation, where some of these school districts are doing raises that are not necessarily fiscally responsible for them to make. So I appreciate that we are trying to be fiscally responsible while keeping in place a lot of these programs in place, that we have in place right now. So.
I'll now move on to discussing grade level aids. As a reminder, this year, 3 grade level aids were added to support grades K through 3, and 1 grade level aid was added to support 6th grade. We conducted a survey of teachers working in grades impacted by the aids and found the aids were most commonly used as shown on the slide. So small group instruction, daily lunch and recess duties, making copies, etc. 79.8% of respondents agreed that the grade level aids reduced their stress level when taking a day off, and 91.4% agreed it was good use of district financial resources. However, it's important to note that the survey did not provide context on other options for those same resources. As some of our discussion has already kind of pointed out, it's hard to make those resource decisions if you don't have context of other options. The governing board requested the cost to expand the grade level aid program. This slide shows the cost of adding 1 grade level aid by grade level. So for example, an additional kindergarten aid for each school would cost approximately $209,000. I think it's important to recognize again that one of the reasons the recommendation is to continue these positions is to allow more data to be collected on the effectiveness of these roles. One of the items that we're looking at is a separate module in the Illuminate platform that would allow us to track these more granular level interventions more closely to see the impact data-wise on specific interventions. And so we're hoping with implementing that next year, we'll have more specific data on effectiveness of some of these individual interventions. At this point, I would like to open it up for discussion on grade level aids.
Mr. Honak, did you have anything for this section?
Yes, looking at the last slide, what is the total of all those numbers if we add all those aids?
Give me just a moment.
It's about 1.6 million, maybe. That's my guess. Let's see now a little more. Yeah, but 1.5 million, something like that.
Yes, 1,600,000. You're pretty much spot on.
Okay, it was just a guess. So, I mean, it sounds good, but then here we are spending more money. But is it in the end, it seems like it would be cost effective because you're taking a higher priced teacher and eliminating, I don't know how you save money on that end, but having the teacher not have to go out and make copies and, deal with lunch and all that stuff. Sounds like it's an effective thing, but is there a way that it's not, doesn't cost, add 1.5 million, we could save it?
So I don't think you would see any reduction in teaching staff, and so there wouldn't really be that offsetting cost savings.
I would say, not that I am recommending that at all, but that while we might not save money, there definitely would be other benefits of
Sure.
cutting out some of the teacher burnout. If we had that, I'm not saying I'm recommending us do that, but I just think there are other benefits that are not financial.
100%. I was just trying to,
Well, I think this survey, if somebody asks you, hey, would you like somebody to help you out? Yeah, sure.
right.
Of course, right? Who's going to say no? So it seems like it's somewhat a self-serving, survey. And so, yeah, everybody would like an aid or an additional aid, but $1.6 million. So
It could lower your substitute teacher, costs, because if teachers are happier, they're not burnt out, they're not gonna feel. I mean, I think that there'd be no way to predict that, but I would say that would, I think there are gonna be some savings somehow.
Ms. Clymer, I don't even know who didn't talk now.
No questions, I guess just some feedback. I think obviously since it's year one of this program, it is really hard to have definitive data that says this is working. We were one semester into this. So I do think we need a full school year to determine the success of this. And I think a $1.6 million price tag to add to that without having verifiable data that it works feels premature to me. So I'm not saying it's off the table for the future, but I do think if this is a resounding success in another 7 months, then we find the money to pay for it. But right now, I think that, knowing the cost, knowing in the back of our mind, we're sort of pre-planning for if this is, crazy successful and we need to find the money, then we're pre-planning for that. But I don't have any hopes necessarily that we would deter other monies this year to do that. I think that's premature. I mean, I agree with the survey that, asking people if they want help and not saying, well, you can have help if you can't have something else, right? We don't have that other piece to it. So if they, if you ask, would you like an apple? They may say yes, but if you said, would you like an apple or would you like a new car? That might be a different story. So we don't know what that would have looked like, but I do think just in the future, next year, as we're looking at the success of this program, I would really love to see a blended evaluation of, I think the intervention data that you talked about and all of that is stellar and amazing. And that's, maybe that's 60 or 70% of this. I think, as Ms. Idema said, the other sort of 25 or 30% of this is how much are we actually reducing teacher burnout? How much are we actually helping them? I know people look and say, lunch and recess duties and making copies and, we're paying someone to help them do that. But over a period of time, every day, freeing up that time to either plan or spend time with other teachers or just, I don't know, eat lunch, that goes a long way. So I think we need to look at the evaluation as kind of a blended approach from both technical data points, but also, whether that's a survey of teachers, I'm not sure exactly how you measure that, but sort of the cultural effect of having that extra help and support in your classroom consistently and not being afraid of that taken away from you, because of budget cuts. So.
Mr. Owens. I don't know who I asked. Ms. Moran, did you already give your feedback?
No, no, I have not yet. I do have some feedback. I would agree with Board Member Clymer that the evaluation is going to have, the evaluation of the additional grade level aids that we already have in place is going to need to have some way to evaluate the intangibles, which are, the hopefully decreased burnout that teachers have. I think one interesting context data point piece would be to ask teachers, would you rather have additional aids and a dollar amount, basically associated with that, and how that would equate to their actual pay. So would you rather have a 0.5, I don't know if these numbers add up, but a 0.5 increase in pay, 0.5%, or would you rather have an aid in your grade? Because that would really, I think, hone in on whether teachers really believe these positions are valuable and whether they're worth paying for. I also think this is not an all or nothing perspective. So I understand that this slide has adding an aid at every single grade. If this is something that we determine to be a successful program, we can implement 2 grades in 1 year, 2 more grades the next year. I mean, we can look at specifically where we think we've had specific teacher turnover in certain grades, or where the achievement needs to be higher in certain grades, and implement this over time, because this is cost effective compared with lowering class sizes, compared with potentially giving teacher increases in pay. So I think it is a worthwhile program. I'm very interested in seeing the actual data. Again, the interventions, I think, is great to see some actual numbers and how this has impacted student achievement. But I think the goal of this was not to directly impact student achievement. It was really to help with teacher retention and reduce teacher burnout, which is why we used the ESSER funds to sustain this program, at least to date. So I'm really interested to see additional data on this.
I'd like to follow up a little too, again, if I could.
Okay.
I agree with that. I agree with Ms. Moran. That, and I think one thing that would be so almost a freebie, if we've done a 79.8% of respondents agreed this and agreed that, if we went back to the same people and just said, how would you equate it to a raise? I think you're going to find overwhelmingly that they would rather have the aid. And the thing that really hits me with the aids is not just making copies and stuff, but the small group intervention, because a lot of times in the class, you really do want to break it up into some groups and stuff. And that's the kind of thing that would be really nerve-wracking for a teacher, to try to sort of manage the whole class and the group. And the biggest thing isn't the teacher's welfare, it's the students. By having an aid that could assist with the small group, whether the aide did the small group or whether the teacher did and the aide kept everybody else in the class, going, is really going to be, it is almost like having 2 teachers, and you just put the teacher on whichever task is more needs their skills. So yeah, I think we should ask a few more questions. I think it could be rolled in, but I'm almost certain that this thing rolled in, not drastically, I think is actually in the end probably going to save money for many reasons.
Okay. I am not recommending us to change. For myself, I don't think that we should change it this year. I definitely let's see how it goes for the rest of this year and into next year. However, I would like to point out that we already added 3 to our K-5 classes or through schools, and we added 1 for our 6 through 8. So we would not have to add all of these grades. We would only have to add 3 more to our elementary schools and 2 more to our middle schools. So it wouldn't be that full number if we wanted 1 for every grade level. just to think about for the future.
And just to be clear, the reason I showed the slide the way I did is I didn't know where the discussion was exactly going to head. And so I wanted to provide the dollar amount for each grade so that wherever the conversation went, we could have the data.
Thank you.
Are we good to move forward?
Yes, we're good to move
Okay.
forward.
I would now like to move the discussion to contracted guest teachers. Similar to the grade level aides, we conducted a survey of teachers to gather feedback on these roles. The most common usage for the contracted guest teachers are shown on the slide. So obviously, most common use is covering academic classes. .2% of respondents agreed that having the contracted guest teachers reduce stress when taking a day off, and 91.9% agreed that the decision to provide the contracted guest teachers was a good use of district resources. In comparison, the response to the guest teachers were slightly more positive than for the grade level aides. This slide shows the importance of our contracted guest teachers in trying to ensure our classrooms have coverage when teachers are out. In November and December, 74 to 75% of the district's substitute needs were being met by the outside vendor support, and up to 86% in January. Our contracted guest teachers play a vital role of helping fill the gap when our contracted vendor cannot meet the district's needs. At this time, I'd like to open up the discussion on contracted guest teachers.
Ms. Clymer.
I think it's really hard for me to, I mean, this is one of those programs where it's really hard for me to evaluate without hard data. How many classes did they fill? How many gaps did we close? How are every school, you know, how I know some travel between schools. So if we have more gaps in one school and they're not being used in the other school, they may go to that school. So being able to see, you know, maybe school A doesn't need them, but school B needs 2 of them or something. So I mean, again, I think the teacher survey and data component there is important, but I think, again, with no context of what else, I mean, I get, this is one of the programs I was talking about. So this program costs roughly $682,000. That's another 1% increase for the staff. That's almost a direct comparison. And so I struggle with evaluating a program that we don't know if it's working, if it's successful, except for from a survey of teachers, which I'm not saying that's not important. I just don't think that's viable data to spend over $500,000 on when we should know where these people are every day. We know how many classes they filled. We know how many ESI gaps they filled. We know how many maybe small groups they were able to do or other schools they were able to assist, or we should know that information. And I think having that would really help determine, because to me, I'm looking at this going, we're still sitting at 74% bill rate here. That's not great. So, you know, it's not really making up the difference. And if that money is sitting there and could be used for something else, I'm left wondering about the success of this program specifically. I'll leave it there.
So I just want to clarify something if I can. The 74% is just what's filled through the contracted. So, and what I mean by that, it's confusing, the verbiage. When I say contracted, I mean the vendor. These additional substitutes are filling in above and beyond that. And so while I don't have the specific numbers today on exactly how many classes they've covered, et cetera, I can say that we still regularly can't meet, even with these positions, all of the sub need.
Yes, no, I understand. I understand that our subs are on top of, but we only have one for every campus. And so I guess my point is if we're still not meeting the need,
right,
and we're spending that much money, maybe we need to be filling that need in a different way. Because if we still have, I understand what you're saying, that we are adding to this, right? We're filling some of these gaps, but we're not filling all the gaps. And I don't have any anticipation that we're ever going to get to 100%. That's not going to happen. Totally get that. But I guess I'm just saying, I really want us to make sure that spending this kind of money is A, absolutely necessary, and B, more important than other initiatives. And the only way to determine that is to see how the program itself is being evaluated. And I'm not sure I have that data to make that decision.
Mr. Owens,
No questions.
Ms. Moran.
No specific questions. I think this is similar to the additional aids in that there are some intangibles that come along with this program. And one of the reasons that we put it in place was so, again, to reduce teacher burnout so that teachers would feel more comfortable having a sub in their class, someone who is familiar with their classroom, familiar with their students, familiar with their campus, rather than having potentially a sub that they've never met or know, come and run their classroom. So I don't have a great suggestion on exactly how to evaluate that, but I agree with Board Member Clymer that we need more information. If we continue this program in the next fiscal year, which I believe we plan to, or the district administration would like us to, we need to have more concrete data to be able to make the decision going into the next year as to whether this program is successful and something that we would want to continue past the point that ESSER funds are expired.
Mr. Honak.
No questions.
I don't have any questions, but same thing as the last survey. We did not ask like, would you rather something else? So I think that's a really important component of asking, because like it's been said by everybody, of course, they're going to say we want more help. Everybody says that. So we need to find out what that help is worth to them, what they're willing to give up, because there is one pot of money, even though it's in different areas, but we have one amount of money that we have to figure out how to allocate. And so I think that when we're getting feedback from the staff, we need to let them be part of that a little in understanding, do you want this or this? Because it really is a choice in everything that we're doing. So I would like to see that information, as well as how they are specifically using them with more data of, I'd rather see our fill rate with them included, so that then we can compare how was our fill rates last year versus our fill rates this year. Because that was something missing too. I feel like we're seeing the fill rates for this year, but what was it like last year before we had them? So that was all.
Understood. Thank you. I would now like to move the discussion to classified hourly employees who are teaching specials classes. These have been at the school's option to use some of their budget to support additional specials. Historically, these positions have been 5.5 hours per day and not benefit eligible. The slide shows the cost of moving the current classified specials teachers to 40 hours a week, including the cost of additional days related to changing their calendar to full-time and the cost of offering benefits. At this point, I'd like to open it up for discussion on classified specials employees moving to 40 hours per week.
Ms. Clymer.
I don't have any questions per se. I mean, this is 31 positions district-wide, correct? I mean, this is everybody included. And is this based on current positions?
Yes.
So this isn't creating sort of consistency across the district, meaning, let me give you an example. If school A has PE, music and art, and school B has PE, art and STEM, I'm just, because there are schools that have differences. That's just creating full-time positions out of what they have. It's not adding any to make additional positions or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay.
The way it currently works is depending on the type of school or size of school you are, you're allocated a certain number of certified specials teachers. And then schools are provided a budget, what we call aid hours. And schools as principal discretion are able to use those 8 hours effectively as they see fit. And one of the ways they can choose to use it is to support an additional specials area. Presently, those positions are typically 5.5 hours per day. And so this was an analysis looking at how many of those we presently have and what the cost would be to move those to
Mhm.
40 hours a week. What I did not try to estimate was if the district began to cover that cost, would more schools choose to use their 8 hours to increase specials? I suspect they might, but I didn't really have a way to
Yeah.
model that in.
Yeah, to know what we don't know. Okay, I don't have a rabbit in a hat and say I have $600,000 like hidden under this dais by any means, but I'm extremely interested in this concept because I agree with the public commenter from earlier, Ms. Jordan, in saying that I think for a long time, because of our focus on specific academic achievement, that we have somehow left behind the other part of academics and the other part of the whole child that we talk about a lot. And, not having every student have access to those things is not okay, right? I mean, every time we go to a campus for years, right, we ask student, what's your favorite class? Now, of course, you're going to have math, reading, English, everything, but so many kids say PE, music, art, STEM. I mean, these are real classes to them. So again, going back to what we just talked about with contracted guest teachers, there's other programs that, when put on the teeter-totter, the balance of what's more important, I think this is something that we should really look at. I think that there's a way we can make this work. And is it going to hurt? Absolutely. Everything hurts when we want to do something new. But I would like to see us move in this direction, whether it's this year or start planning for that in the next year, because I think we need to put more emphasis on having people full-time, because I do agree with the commenter in that when you have a full-time job and you get benefits, it is a lot different than working 5 hours a day or only working Monday through Thursday and not being considered the same or equivalent to your peers on campus. So I do think there's a difference there. And I think that this will remedy that specifically, but also making sure that every one of those positions is filled on our campus, because I know how hard it is to fill those positions also, because you don't have benefits and you're almost full-time, but not really. So, it's kind of that in between. And I know retention is really hard. So I think this solves some of those problems, not all of them. So I'm interested to hear what other board members think, but I am very interested in seeing how this might fit into the budget.
Mr. Owens.
Yeah, I'm going to keep using this as long as I can. Being the new guy, I'm learning a lot of stuff. And what I heard earlier, and then some emails that I received, and then seeing this was actually really surprising to me. In elementary school, PE, art, all that stuff was like a staple. And it was something that honestly, I feel like helped me learn and actually do better in my other classes, whether it was because I burned a bunch of energy and I could focus in class, or I just got to use different parts of my brain. And so finding out that a lot of our specials aren't certified, don't have benefits, don't have 40 hours. I feel like we're at a point where I would rather look at taking care of who we have instead of expanding. And yeah, adding other positions to help ease burdens is great, but we've got a lot of people who have committed their time and years and energy to this district, and I'd like to see that rewarded.
Ms. Moran.
I don't have any questions or comments. I don't feel as strongly about this as I think some of the other board members do. I'm open to hearing more about it. It's not something that I think must happen today. I do think it's probably a good best practice for consistency. I mean, I have seen a lot of inconsistency with the way that our specials are run, and maybe, implementing it as being full-time would increase some of the consistency, not necessarily between the types of programs, but the quality of the programs in our specials that we offer.
Mr. Honak.
I think that I agree with Ryan, is that it's really, a music program is really important. Music has a lot to do with intellect and developing your mind. And I'm all for these positions being full-time. So just doing some very quick math. If we wanted to keep it at 600,000, if we, I believe that we could do that and add 8 hours a day and benefits, but we would have to reduce the number of positions to about, say, 21. And it was just very rough math. So, so the thing is that, yeah, we don't want to get rid of 11 people, but the logic would be that through attrition, you could just, as people leave, just don't rehire, but then you would be requiring, say, the person that's working 5.5 hours a day, well, they've already gotten there and whatever, so maybe they could do do close to double the work, so that they or 30-40% more work because they've got more time in the day. And if they needed to, jump over to another nearby school, some of them. So I think by giving the benefits and giving more hours, which is more money in their pocket, they don't have to have a second job somewhere, but we're going to give them the second job where they could be covering more for us. So I'm just saying that's a way to look at this without without any increased cost. And I think I would say that of the 31 people, I probably think a pretty high percentage of them would be willing to take on a lot more if they know that they've got, their income covered and things like that. So that's just a dimension I think we might want to really look at.
So I do have a question, because when we brought this up, for me, I wasn't sure if it needed to be certified teachers or if it should be full-time. And the reason is because I want to know how we would handle it if they are not, like if one of these specials teachers that's not a certified teacher is out, they wouldn't be eligible to get a sub to come in for them, which I think is important. So how would we handle that with them being full-time, but not as a certified teacher?
I think one of the things we'd have to look at, if that was something that was of interest, then we'd have to look at our agreement with ESI to see if there are instructional aids that could be acquired for subbing. So that would be one component to look at, and then look into those pieces. Right now, the subs that we have for instructional aids are done through special education or for special education, and that's through a different company. So that's where we would just need to have your guidance. And if that was something that you were, if this is the route we go and that's something we're interested, we'd have to pull back out that agreement to see if they're able to meet that. I'm not even positive if they do or not. I mean, they might. We've just never had that conversation with them.
I'm pretty sure that I have heard from ESI people that they do have subs for aides. It's just not something we have used in our district. So I'm pretty sure that we could find that out. But I just wanted to make sure this was important to me for us to put this on here, because I know that we did have full-time specials teachers originally, way back when my kid first started school, that's no longer here. And now we don't. And we've had to make cuts because of the recession in 2008 and all these things that happened. And we have moved away from that. But to what Ms. Clymer said, every school tour I've ever been on, every student, what's your favorite part of the day? Every single one says something that has to do with specials. And we know that physical activity for kids helps them to do better in school. So we know that them getting more PE time, more moving around and getting to do different experiences. Plus, we know that not every student is that math kid, is that reading kid, but having the ability to have art and music in their campus allows for them to develop a different talent of theirs and allows for us to grow our students as the whole child, like Ms. Clymer had mentioned. So this is really important to me that we figure out how to try to make this work if the board is all wanting to see that happen. And I would be willing to look at what else we need to look at and cut back on, or else consider doing this to see how that impacts our students and then adjust it, like reevaluating in a year, like, do we see that this is helping? Where can we cut? This is another thing I understand we're adding, but I think this will help our teachers. I know so many specials teachers that put in so many hours not paid to put lesson plans together for an entire school and all the grade levels all the time. And they should be treated the same as our teachers that are teaching in the classroom, because they are doing a ton of work and they should be recognized for that. They should have the opportunity to have the same professional development we offer for them. They should be able to have all these same opportunities that our teachers have. And I want to see us figure out how we can make it happen for them.
Can I ask just one more quick question? I'm sorry, now I'm out of turn. I want to sort of, I know this is an open-ended question, but I know this was a board request, so this wasn't on the original administrative recommendation. So sort of hearing the feedback now and, you know, kind of looking at the price tag and all of that kind of stuff, what is the administration's, you know, sort of stance at this point? I mean, look, hearing what we've said and, you know, sort of knowing how the current system works, you know, how does that fit into part of your recommendation? Are you still sort of saying, you know, no, this, we would certainly love to do this, but we just can't? Or is this something that there is a way to work this out? This is worth pursuing? I just kind of want to know where the administration stands, because I don't necessarily want, I mean, out of respect, you put a lot of thought and effort into making these recommendations. So I'd like to know what you guys think about it.
Well, I think what we'd have to do is, what we're hoping to come out of tonight is which pieces are you leaning towards in a more stronger fashion? And maybe that is something that if it does get too tight from a budget perspective, maybe that's a perfect time to survey, right? Would you rather? Here's a list, prioritize the list, and that's information that's brought back. I think it's hard just sitting and listening, you know, all of these things are so important and we definitely see an impact, but it's also at, you know, 600,000, 600,000, 600,000, 600,000. So I think that's where you're just going to have to determine, and, or is it worth taking the risk knowing in, you know, as you're approaching that 2025, 26 school year, that there could be drastic cuts. So I don't, you know, I don't have necessarily a lean either way. We did align, and I think that was something too we had talked about even last year previously, was really talking about what is the focus of our specials and what ultimate goal do we really want. We've always staffed specials based on the size of the campus. And so that's where you'll see a campus that'll have more specials or more options than other campuses. We have a basic standard of 2 certified at every campus for elementary. That does increase for middle school. Now, middle school did take a drastic hit back in the early, 2008, I believe it was, that there was drastic cuts to their special areas because they had double of everything. So I think trying to figure out if it's really that being comfortable leaning towards the classified, is it the types of programs so that you have equal offerings? They may not be the same because a lot of times you can't always find that specific type of person. And then really being prepared to determine, you know, where is the priority? Is it, are the classified staff K3 and 6th grade nice to haves, and this is a have to have? I think that's where we just need the guidance of, you know, kind of seeing where you guys are leaning. And then that way, you know, Michael can go back and rework the numbers to see, okay, here's the final, you know, couple of recommendations and the impact it would have.
Did anybody else have any follow-up questions? Mr. Owens, Mr. Honak, Ms. Moran?
No.
Okay.
I'm
May
good.
I ask a follow-up
Yes.
question? Could we just have a little bit more discussion on the board's feel between potentially implementing this sort of change for next year versus the year after, to be able to incorporate that into the budget cut discussions to try to align the process? Because I heard from some members that that potentially a future year might be fine, and other board members, it seemed more urgent. I just want to make sure that a future agenda item for action is aligned with the governing board's intentions with this area.
I would like to see this as soon as possible, but I'm definitely open to what the rest of the board has to say.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think what Superintendent Gunning said is really important, that, you know, a decision without sort of prioritization overall of what we want this program to be is not a smart move. So just saying we want to hire these people because we want great programs without actually planning for what those great programs are going to be, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But I do think we have programs in place right now, right, that are working and children are enjoying them and teachers are teaching them, classified or certified. And so I think for me, I would like to see us move into this and move into it slowly. So we may start with just this part now where, you know, they can't all be certified. We know we can't afford that. So, you know, kind of stepping back and saying, okay, we might be able to do 40 hours a week with classified and benefits. Moving forward, we, you know, take another step 2 years from now, we take another step and we progress in that direction. I also understand that this has to be in lieu of something else. So, you know, I'm not in favor of adding this on top of everything else that's here, because as Superintendent Gunning mentioned, you know, that $3 million is growing and we're going to have to cut those things. But in terms of, you know, I don't look at it as, would I want this rather than AIDS or something like that? We're going to have to make those comparisons. But I think at the end of the day, we just have to say what is best for students, and what is the recommendation from our educators that say what is best for students. And if it means that we lose another component because that's less of an impact on our students, then that's what we need to do, in my opinion. So I would be up for seeing what other components of the budget could be adjusted for next year to make room for this. I'm not in favor of adding $600,000 without any adjustment.
If I can comment, I think that that a lot of these things first off, we know we have a mandate that we can't be adding to our budget. We're supposed to be cutting. But of these several things, there are certainly ways that they can be done incrementally, and they can be, and they should be, they absolutely can be done in a way that in the net effect will add no cost. We're going to, if we're talking about the 5.5 hours moving to 8 hours, we're going to need to require more out of each individual person and lower the amount of people through attrition. And as far as the aides go, we have to figure out a way that it is going to, you know, with some certainty, reduce other costs like substitute teachers and things like that. So we need to look at them in that regard. And if we do that and we can find that it comes very close to not adding any money, that's what we should be doing. That's what life is all about, figuring out, improving efficiency.
Mr. Owens.
Yeah, I'd like to see some progress made this year when it comes to the specials. You know, however that may be, as much as it can be, given the budget restraints. So I'd like to see some progress made, this prioritized over some of the other stuff on the list.
Can I ask another follow-up question? Sorry.
Yes, I was going to ask Ms. Moran first.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Ms. Moran, did you have feedback?
Yeah, I mean, my feedback would be that I think as a board and as a district, we need to get on the same page with what we want specials to be. You know, I hearken back to our community ed and our preschool program. I've asked the question again and again, what is our goal of preschool? And I'm going to ask the same question. What is our goal of specials? What's our goal? What are we aiming for? Because I think I'm hearing different people saying different things are going to get us to where we want to be, but do we even know where we want to be? Do we want, is making these positions full-time getting us to where we want to be? Is that the correct step in the right direction? So I would rather us go slow on this, and hopefully the people who we have in specials right now would say, hey, the board isn't sure what needs to happen. The administration of the district isn't sure what needs to happen, but they want to improve these programs, not only for the employees who are running them, but also for the students. And so I'd like to see us actually evaluate and determine, what do we want these specials to look like? Do we want them to be consistent across campuses? Do we want them to be consistent based on student population? I don't know that we're on the same page with that. And I think this feels like a Band-Aid that we might have to then back up on if we come to the point where we're like, no, we want every campus to have the same number of specials. We might need multiple positions at 5.5 hours per day. That might be the way that we can offer all of those specials. So I don't have enough information to say, yes, let's do this for the next fiscal year, in my opinion.
Go ahead, your follow-up question.
So looking at the slide, we have 31 positions that currently fall under this designation. And I'm not saying that they're evenly distributed. I don't have that data in front of me, but just mathematically, that looks like it's about 2 per school. So could one potential solution be to not do it for every current position, but potentially do it for one position per school?
I feel like I don't know how you would pick which one at every school gets to do that. That would be my concern. Like, that would be us saying, we value this over this. And I don't personally like that. I don't think that feels good. So.
Okay.
So to clarify, every school would be given one full-time, and then they
It would be up to principal discretion to decide
which special was full-time. And would this be a tiered approach, meaning year 1, it would be 1, and then year 2, it would be 2? Or
potentially. I was just
1?
trying to propose one potential avenue to walk into this slowly.
Yeah. I understand what Ms. Idem is saying. I don't feel as strongly. I mean, I think if our, and taking into account what Ms. Moran said, I do agree that, walking into something without a goal is just hoping things are going to work out with no plan. And I don't think the board is the one to create that plan, to be totally honest, right? I mean, I think we need people, we need the educators and the administrators in the room to say, this is what we want this program to be. And then our job is to find resources to pay for that and to make sure that every student is receiving consistent education. So I think we've got to pair up and we've got to work together and collaborate on that. I think that I would be okay with starting slow and going one at a time if we knew what that end goal was and we were moving towards it. So if we had year 1, we added 1 position, year 2, we were able to add another, if that was what was determined to be appropriate, I'm on board with that. If we were just going to add 1 and then not ever talk about it again, that doesn't feel right to me. I think we could probably use this money in a different way and or try and address the specials issue differently. So I think it's sort of determined by long-term goals, what we want to do.
Mr. Owens.
Honestly, I think I'm getting more and more confused because I hear board member Moran ask, what's our specials plan? What do we want out of our specials? How do we not know that? Like, I know I'm brand new, so I'm not pointing fingers or blaming, anything else, but like, how do we not already know that? So why?
I'm happy to answer
You don't
that.
want to, you don't want to put a Band-Aid, but it sounds like it's like a open wound that needs a Band-Aid, or it's just going to keep getting worse and it's not going to be effective at all. And so I think we either need to do something and make a plan, or do you want to get rid of all of them completely? Because that doesn't make sense to have these important specials not without a plan.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that, why we don't have a plan. In my opinion, the reason we don't have a consistent plan is because we have the administration historically has allowed, as you've heard on numerous topics tonight, each campus to make their own decisions and allowed them agency. And in some cases, that agency has worked out really well. And in other cases, we end up with inconsistencies. You may have, seen that with curriculum. You may have seen that with, many programs that we have in our schools, and specials is one of those inconsistencies. And so that's where the board over the past few years has tried to increase consistency and increase the consistency of the programs that are offered across our campuses. The past 2 years, we have asked Superintendent Gunning for specific information regarding specials and clubs at each campus to try to make those more equitable across our campuses. And progress has been made, but we still have a way to go. And that's true with so many of our programs. You will learn, Board Member Owens, that we are far from perfect. But when these things come up and we realize that there's work to be done, we do request that work, that we have those open discussions so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to things like specials. And this is just one of the areas that we've been working on the past couple of years.
So what's been done over the last couple of years then?
Basically, we did an inventory. Superintendent Gunning did an inventory of what specials were offered on each campus, as well as what clubs were offered on each campus. And we are now offered more clubs to try to, again, make those offerings, not the same offerings, but at least closer to the same number of offerings. But as Superintendent Gunning said earlier, historically, our specials have been based on campus size, which makes sense because you're serving a certain number of students. So from a board member's perspective, that's what I would say, but certainly we can hear from the administration and what they would like to say about the way specials are currently operated and the decisions that are being made.
Yeah, I'd love to hear something.
So we have consistent specials pretty much across all of the schools. There are some schools that did allow or did opt to take in more classified, to do more specials. Like in particular at L. Thomas Heck, they added more so that they could do more collaboration time amongst their teachers. The specials have always been geared towards the size of the campus. That's just kind of how it has been once the cuts were made back in 2008. So this was that beginning piece. The first thing we focused on were the clubs and making sure that we had nice options for children for after school clubs. This was the second piece of kind of getting more guidance from the governing board of what is the priority. The hard part is the governing board has also turned over and different people had different priorities. So trying to figure out what is the priority in regards to specials.
Are you each principals at each school have some discretion and authority over how they spend their specials then too?
Not for certified, but for classified. So for K-5 schools, they each have 2 certified specials. Most of those, every school has a PE teacher, and then most have music, either a music art combo or a music drama combo. And then the classified staff at those grade levels, each of them have at least 2. Some have added a 3rd. And those are the campuses that are a little bit larger in size, that they added a 3rd special. K-8s are a little different because they're servicing 9 grade levels. So they have a little bit more of a certified caseload, as well as for our middle schools. You'll see more special area teachers at a middle school than you would at an elementary school.
So does the administration feel like there's deficiencies in our specials at each school or at different schools or at some schools?
I have not heard that specific coming back to me. Usually a lot of times when there's conversations in regards to special, it's being able to allow for collaboration time for their grade levels or for their teams, especially if they're growing. So we've had some schools that have grown in size and also some that have declined in size. But when they're growing, they, are looking to add more special area teachers so that they can definitely meet those collaboration times. But our campuses have always had their standard ones, so they haven't been without those. So I don't know. I mean, that could be a whole different conversation, right? If they didn't have a PE or didn't have a music. So I think that's just seeing where the governing board is sitting can help Michael in planning on which direction and what's a priority.
Can I respond to that comment, Mr. Owens? So feedback that I've heard, because you heard, right, it's that they don't get enough collaboration time. They're talking about the classroom teachers. But what you're not hearing is that the specials teachers, which generally there's their 2 certified teachers, but then you have aides that come in for 5.5 hours. They have 5.5 hours to do lessons for every grade in the entire school and to work with every kid in the entire school. And they have to do all of that, plus teach the kids, plus have supplies ready, plus prep, all those things. And why the feedback I'm getting from our specials teachers is that they are not valued like a classroom teacher. They're having collaboration time is not as important. They're not getting that time. It's not built into their schedule. There's no time for that. So for me, that's why it was important for us to look at making them full-time and making them not necessarily be a teacher, but at least be treated the same as the teachers on their campuses so that they have that prep time. So they have that collaboration time with other peers. So they can have the PD that they get from their schools, because there's a lot of PD that's done for all the teachers that help them to understand how to work with our kids. And they might be missing those key components when they're working with every student in their entire school.
Can I also just add one thing, just fundamentally, I think maybe I'm looking at this a little bit differently than one of the comments that was just made, is that to me, creating a specials class for a child, whether that's STEM or PE, music, art, I know there's several different that we offer, is not about, shouldn't only be about creating planning time for teachers. And that we're creating a PE class so that other teachers can plan. We should be creating a PE class because kids need PE. We should be creating a PE class or an art class because kids need art, not because it works out in our schedule. So I agree with what you're saying, that it helps those things, but fundamentally, I'm in a different place. I don't think that that's what specials are for.
Right.
So
You were just he was asking historically, that's just kind of how it's been structured and kind of the creation of it. When we did the major budget cuts, before doing the major budget cuts, yeah, there was an absolute priority, I would say in the middle schools more so than elementary, of having a substantial amount of special area. The thing that the board did do a few years back, I believe it was prior to COVID, was they did add the dollar stipend to the classified. So if a classified staff member takes a special area class, they receive $1 an hour stipend for their time while they're teaching. If they were to leave that position, they lose that stipend. So that was something that the governing board did pre-pandemic.
Which we did do, but again, that was supposed to be a step towards this bigger picture of trying to get them to be full-time or to be certified teachers. So at that time, it was my understanding that we were just taking steps forward. So how we're saying now, do we want to do 1 and then 2? I would rather just do 2 and just rip the Band-Aid off and get it done at one time, because I don't want to be next year being like, well, we're looking at cutting $3.1 million next year. So we can't really make that next specials teacher be full-time now. Mr. Honak, did you have any more questions or comments?
No, I think that you actually made things very clear.
Ms. Moran,
No further questions.
Ms. Clymer?
no, just I guess my only question for Michael is that, I mean, clearly we have some opinions, but we're not necessarily on the same page. I mean, it sounds like we're moving in the right direction, but do you feel like you have what you need to move forward? I mean, do we need to formalize any kind of quorum situation so that you understand what to do moving forward?
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Take your time.
What I'm hearing from the governing board is that potentially we would like to move forward with this recommendation. Does that seem?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we going individually saying yes or?
Yes.
Oh, yes, I agree with that comment, but I guess everyone should answer that.
I mean, I don't think we have to go individually. If anyone disagrees, you can just.
Okay, then. Yes, that's what it sounds like. Everybody would like us to go forward with that.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to Leanne to discuss the district's leave payouts.
Good evening, President Zeideman, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gutting, and meeting attendees. Thank you for the opportunity to continue our discussion on the 23-24 budget. We brought this slide today, or this evening, to respond to requests from our January study session, where we were asked to detail the annual average cost of personal earned leave payouts compared to the cost of an additional 1% raise. So you'll see that there, the cost there is the average with benefits for a buyback and then a payout of unused leave. And I'll talk about each of those just quickly. So a buyback of personal leave is when the annual payment occurs when an employee exceeds a balance of 100 days. So this is a once a year buyout or buyback when a balance exceeds 100 days, and that balance or that payout never exceeds 10 days and is paid at a quarter of the substitute teacher daily rate. Important to note here with that buyback option is that in order for an employee to have a 100-day balance, they typically have worked for the district for approximately 9 years. The unused balance, accrued balance payout occurs when an employee leaves the district. So the employee must have reached 5 consecutive years of service to receive a payout of 50% of the substitute daily rate. Employees with 10 to 15 years of consecutive service receive the sub daily rate, and employees with 15 or more years of service are paid at the long-term sub rate or their daily rate, whichever is lower. So to highlight on this slide, you will notice the total cost of the average payout for the years that were evaluated equates to about a 0.5% raise. So you'll notice at the bottom of the slide, that's the cost that Michael showed earlier for the cost of an additional 1% raise. And so you'll see the average cost that we typically pay for these payout of earned leaves is about half of that.
And one thing I just want to add, the reason I showed both average and median is the last couple of years, we've had some very long-term employees leaving, which were skewing the average a little bit higher. So I just wanted to show, the median obviously meaning 50% of the time it was under that amount, 50% of the time it was over, whereas the average is just that true average.
So I will pause here on this slide for any questions you may have on leave payouts.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret, I'm not a fan of this policy. I understand this is what the current policy is, but this is definitely something that I think I'm the only person in favor of changing this policy this year. But I think when it comes down to having to make some serious cuts in a year or two, this is definitely going to be something that I am going to bring up again, because I don't like the fact that we are encouraging our folks to not take their leave and then get paid out when they do leave down the road. To me, that's not a long-term incentive that makes sense.
Mr. Honak.
I kind of have the opposite point of view. I think it's a very good incentive, and it benefits our students and teachers and everything if they want to work, so that's my feeling.
Mr. Owens.
Wow, I'm in the middle because I guess I missed it in all this numbers and stuff last meeting. The leaving service I'm very familiar with. The accrued payout is kind of foreign to me. So maybe I missed that. That's just if you have 100, every time you get over 100, you get paid out. So everything I've always experienced is, you hit a number or you hit a date and then you can only carry over so much. And then everything else so you have to take your leave. So if we're going to cut anything out of here, I think we take the buyback, but I like the unused leave
Ms. Clymer.
if we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I could agree with that. I'm open to suggestions. I think this is a good benefit. Well, first I want to say thank you to the folks that helped me through this morning. Called me because like I said, every year I ask the same questions. It's not because I'm not paying attention. It's because this is just not how my brain works with all of these numbers. But so I do appreciate that this is an important benefit for our long-term employees. And obviously we want to retain our long-term employees as much as we can. I also understand the flip side of that, we have to make multiple cuts across the board in order to come up with this money. So I'm open to suggestions. I don't feel strongly one way or the other. I think, what Mr. Owen said is, a good idea. I'm interested to see what Ms. Moran has to say about, some kind of policy changes. I'm on the fence about this. I don't feel that strongly one way or the other, but I'm open to suggestions.
I am in the same camp of, I think that I don't have strong feelings one way or the other, but I do like trying to find a balance possibly with what Mr. Owen said. So Ms. Moran, did you have a follow-up?
No follow-up. I don't have any specific recommendations for this year.
Okay. Anything else? We all good? Okay.
Okay. So in January, we also brought this slide. If you remember in Jeremy Caius's compensation study, he recommended and identified a small group of 12 positions that he recommended for additional increase to bring compensation to the median. During the January 31st study session, we were asked to review the compensation history to include salary exception history of the employees in the 12 positions identified by the compensation study. This review was completed along with reviewing the employees' total years of related experience. So I just wanted to walk through what process we went through. We calculated where the employee would be placed today on the revised placement chart. So that revised placement chart is the one that is recommended by the compensation study, bringing that placement chart to the median. We then took the employee's total years of related experience, and we placed them on that chart, that revised chart. The final recommendation was then to match the employee to that placement or the flat dollar amount that was recommended by the compensation study, whichever was lower. If the employee's current rate exceeds the placement, the employee was modeled to receive a 2% increase. Additionally, if placement resulted in less than a 2% raise, then that employee was also modeled to receive at least a 2% increase. By doing this process, it factors in prior salary exceptions and total years of experience. So on this slide, this is a recap of the slide we presented in the January study session, showing the total cost of the increase to the median for the placement charts recommended. So this slide shows the totals before taking into account the additional analysis that was requested of us by the governing board in January. Okay, this slide shows an update, the new total needed to increase the positions to median. You'll notice that the increase to the median total is now $43,493 less than the estimate we provided in January. This is due to that historical compensation review of each employee. Several of the employees were compensated or are compensated correctly and require only a standard increase or a 2% as we modeled in this. At this time is a good place to pause and take feedback or questions.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I'm in support of, paying the additional to make sure we get to the median. I think there's a lot of work done to review every position and every sort of band of positions. And I think it's important for us to make this a priority.
Mr. Owens,
No questions.
Mr. Honak,
No questions.
Ms. Moran,
No questions.
no questions.
Okay, moving along. So at the January study session, we were also asked to review technology positions. I'd like to put a reminder here that one technology position was included in the compensation study that we've been talking about with a recommendation to increase the compensation to the median. So what we did here is we evaluated all technology employees' salary history, just similar process that I just talked through. We completed the same type of review and that we've highlighted to bring those positions to the median. We took the technology employee and placed them on the current placement chart based on their total years of related experience. What we discovered is that all but one position in technology is appropriately placed. I would like to share that we did discover an opportunity to improve our recruitment and hiring plan for this department. Some of those improvements include updating our postings with using search optimized language. This will allow for our postings to be more visible when searched on Indeed and other sources. We also recommend targeted advertisements with the budget, and that would take working alongside Director Cruz and Director Nuanez to identify how best to target candidates on Indeed and on our social media platforms. And then lastly, having HR work with Director Cruz to determine a hiring team that can quickly review and contact our applicants when they apply. So when you do this improved recruitment efforts, you get a funnel of candidates that come in rather quickly, and you've got to act on those quickly. Most of the time when candidates in technology apply for a position, they're applying for multiple positions at one time. And so you want to respond to them quickly so that we can get them to start thinking of LESD as a potential employer of choice. So our recommendation is to first focus on recruitment and hiring before we consider additional compensation adjustments for the technology department. At this time, I welcome any questions or feedback regarding the technology positions review.
Ms. Moran.
I'm on board with the plan to, refocus on the recruitment and hiring plan if we think that's the problem. But I don't want us to wait until next year at this time to determine if that increased focus on recruitment and hiring is not working. I want us to be able to have some flexibility to make some salary or pay compensation changes sooner than our next budget talks next year if we find that the recruitment and hiring is not doing what we need to fill those gaps in technology.
Mr. Honak,
No questions.
Mr. Owens,
No questions.
Ms. Clymer.
No questions.
I think I'm on board with trying that. I think I'm in line with Ms. Moran in we try this, but we leave flexibility to increase pay, because what I do know is that we have thrown a lot at our IT department this year. We have gone one-to-one with our devices. So that already makes them responsible for way more than they were ever responsible for. I know that they have positions that haven't been filled the entire year, which means that they are shorthanded this whole year. And I don't know exactly how many staff members they have, but even being a few members short for an entire year could be a pretty good percentage of how many people they have to do the work. So I think that we need to be ready to fix this faster if our recruitment efforts aren't working. I don't want to see us waiting. I don't even want to wait 6 months. I hope that we can come back to this sooner and see that we've been able to fill the positions or we haven't, if we're finding good candidates. Because I think that technology, while I understand there might be areas in a school setting that we don't pay the same as in private sector, technology runs everything that we do in this district. We need them. So we need to make sure that they want to come work for us and that they're going to stay working for us. So I want us to make sure we're acting quickly on whatever it is that we're doing.
Thank you. I think that's fair feedback. And so we will get marching ahead quickly on those recruitment efforts. That's something that can be done now. And then we can revisit this after we get some data behind that. Okay. So moving on to benefits. This is a brief recap of the district's anticipated benefits renewal. As a reminder, we're expecting an increase in our medical rates of 5 to 10%, could be upwards of $629,000 annually to the district. We have talked about previously that there is a rate pass, no increase for our dental or vision premiums, and that's been confirmed by Valley Schools for us, so that's good news. We are expecting our medical renewal on March 1st. Assuming that there are no surprises in that renewal, we anticipate bringing our final district recommendation for plan year 23-24 benefits at the March 7th regular governing board meeting. This slide is just a brief reminder, a recap. We showed this in January as well, that this is assuming a 5% rate increase. So that's that lower end of that number that I just talked about, and passing along those increases to the employees and what that cost is per paycheck. So just as a reminder here, the Banner Classic Gold plan would increase by $17.51 a paycheck for the employee coverage. The Banner Copay Gold would now cost $19.26 per paycheck, but the district would still be able to offer a free employee medical plan under the high deductible HSA plan, and we would be able to contribute $906 annually to each employee's health savings account. So at the January study session, we were asked to provide education to district employees about the difference and the benefits of a high deductible healthcare plan that's tied to an HSA. This evening, I'm prepared to walk through a sample education that we would provide to our employees during enrollment in the spring. This slide showcases the differences between the three plans. I'm just going to highlight a few things. Important to note that all of our plans offer preventative care at no cost. So those are those annual visits, those screenings, immunizations, those types of things are free. I also want to highlight the difference in order from low to high, the annual maximum out-of-pocket costs for an individual. So this is an annual number. On the Banner Classic Gold, the annual out-of-pocket maximum is $3,200. The high deductible healthcare plan is $4,500, and the Banner Copay Gold plan is $5,080. So important to note there that that high deductible healthcare plan is right there in the middle. Also important to note that the high deductible healthcare plan is eligible for a health savings account. And as I mentioned previously, our recommendation would be that the district provide a $906 annual contribution to this fund for the employee. So there is a natural hesitancy against a high deductible healthcare plan. I know, I've been there. when I've chosen this plan 10 years ago for myself. I wanted to highlight the benefits of having a health savings account, or what we call an HSA. As a reminder, the IRS requires that an individual be on a high deductible healthcare plan or an HDHP plan to be eligible for an HSA account. HSA users have the following benefits: lower monthly premiums typically for that plan. And in our case, if we continue with the recommendation that we've talked about, the HDHP plan would be free for employees, for the employee coverage. Contributions to the district and those that an employee has the option to make to their HSA are not taxed. So that is tax-free money that goes into those accounts. Employees can earn interest on their HSA balances. And as long as you use the money for qualified medical expenses, which those are numerous, they include dental and vision as well as medical, the money remains tax-free. And important to note here, HSA money is always your money. It is never a use or lose. It rolls over from year to year. It goes with you when you leave the district or when you retire.
Ms. Rikes?
Yes.
Can I just, in the essence of time,
Yes.
I'm assuming all the board members have read the presentation. If we can just skip through these, I think they're good information definitely for our employees to have. And I hope that we are having these conversations with all of them as they're doing their benefits thing. But if we can just skip to any questions, just so that we can, for everybody's time, if that would be
Sure.
okay.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
And just to mention to that point, yes, during open enrollment, we would go through these scenarios and through these comparisons and even have conversations with employees about what option may make the best sense for them. So at this time, I'm happy to ask or take any questions or feedback.
Ms. Clymer?
I don't have any specific questions. I'm looking forward to March 1st and hopefully, fingers crossed, some good news here. Not that 5% is good news, but 5 is better than 10 in this scenario. But also just want to say I'm very happy that we do have one plan that still remains free to employees. I think that's really important for that. So I'm absolutely in favor of approving something that looks similar to this when the real numbers come back, if we can maintain that low cost for at least one plan.
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, same as board member Clymer. Thanks.
Mr. Honak?
I like what's being done, and I think the HDHP HSA thing is good for lots of reasons, including incentivizing good health.
Ms. Moran?
Yeah, I agree. I'm in favor of what we've talked about so far, going forward. Again, pending what the actual numbers come out on what the increases will be next year. I do also really like your presentation, Director Rikes, on the advantages of an HSA. I know change can be scary for some people, but as I mentioned before, I've been on an HSA for, I think it's close to 20 years, and now you couldn't get me to go back. So I think part of the hurdle that we're going to have to overcome is the education, and I think you're doing a great job with that. So thank you.
I don't have any questions either. Thank you so much for putting this together. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so next, we're almost to the end. So just so we know where we're at. So we mentioned earlier that we hope to bring the district's benefit package to recommendation for governing board vote on March 7th. So at that time, we also want the governing board would request that you consider a recommendation for an employee appreciation plan under the benefits umbrella. The concept is to provide administrators with a menu of governing board approved benefits to recognize and encourage employee appreciation over the fiscal year. So some examples of that you'll see on the slide here would be t-shirts, recreational outings, snacks, breakfasts, recognitions, flowers, for celebrations, those types of things. Research does show that employee appreciation items like this are more effective when employees are competitively compensated. And just going back to the salary compensation study that we've been talking about, overall, our district employees are compensated competitively compared to our peers. And so we're in that right place to do something like this. We believe that these benefits can be supported with ESSER funds, and that we can provide research over the year that tests the effectiveness of this benefit on employee retention as well. And you'll notice the annual cost here, the $75,250, that is factoring in an estimate about $50 per employee that a administrator can then use, as needed through the menu of choices if they were approved. So now would be a good time for questions or feedback about this potential option to our benefits package.
So I'm going to ask a question that you mentioned that this can help with teacher retention, right? I'm wondering, not that it's one of these, but is there other things that we should be looking at in our budget for teacher retention? And I don't know if it's a budget thing, but we have had some feedback, right, from staff about teacher retention. And would it be better for us to look at something like weekly early releases over a $50 gift? Like, which is that something that would be a better thing for us to look at as a board? Or in addition to this, I don't know.
So I think that that would be something interesting to look at. And we've talked about in other slides earlier this evening where we talked about, the question to staff of would you rather this versus that, right? This is not a question we have asked, right? Would you like to have these things versus an early release day a week or those types of things? So we've not asked that.
Okay. And is an early release thing like a budget thing? Is that something that impacts the budget?
I look to Michael for that question.
I think it would depend on how it's structured, and how it ends up working with instructional days and things of that nature. So I think there's certainly ways that it could have a budget impact and certainly ways that it might have less of a budget impact, but it would all depend on the specifics of how it was structured.
Okay. I only ask because these things look all nice and great, but I want to make sure that whatever we're doing is really impacting that. And so if we can do both, great. If we need to, if we could do one, that would be something. And I don't even know, like, I'm just throwing this out there. The rest of the board could be like, we hate weekly early releases. So who knows how that would go. But I just, from a budget perspective, while we're talking budgets and we're talking teacher retention and ways to help our teachers, that seems to be something that's come up a bunch. So sorry, Ms. Clymer.
Sure. Just to address your comment here, I have also been approached by, teachers, staff members, et cetera, about early release days. What I will say is with everything else, I have an open mind. We haven't talked about that in detail, so I don't have a lot of background knowledge or data. So I would be interested to see some proposal of what that would look like. I think, obviously we have some hurdles to overcome in terms of scheduling and places for kids to go and things like that in early release. I know our sister districts do them and are successful. So there probably is a plan of action there, but I also think we need to, think about instructional time and days and how that impacts our students and their growth. So that's a lot of factors to put into place in a plan, but I'm absolutely willing to look and see if that's, because that is something that staff does mention quite frequently. In terms of this employee appreciation, I think for the cost that it is, which is, fairly low in comparison to our menu of choices tonight. I think it's great. And I think for all of those reasons that you mentioned, it's really great. But one thing that sticks out to me is this might be really, really important on campuses that do not have a high parent involvement, PTO, PTA, PTSA. We have some campuses that have all of these things and more because their parents have the time and financial status to be able to provide them. We have some campuses that don't. And being able to have the staff feel as valued and have these things and have the principal be able to determine what their staff needs and wants, I think could be powerful. It's not a lot of money, but it's more than some of those campuses have had to do these special things for staff only, in lieu of having a really involved parent organization. So I'm supportive of it.
Mr. Owens,
I have no questions.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I'm all for employee appreciation. I think, it's one of those things that you really can't appreciate folks too much. However, we say we're going to use ESSER funding for this. We know ESSER funding is one time, basically, is what we have left. It is a year of that. And so are we going to then evaluate this program to see if it actually did have an impact on retention? I do agree with Board Member Clymer's point that some of our campuses are doing all of these things already and more because they have amazing PTOs and PTAs and parents who can support the campus financially in these ways. And so then we have other campuses that don't have that. So I'm not saying I'm against this idea, but one of the things that's not in this presentation that I would like us to see how we can solve the problem, and I've mentioned it before, is transportation. Would this $75,000 be better used to give sign-on bonuses to student transporters so that we can make sure our students are getting to school on time so that they can learn appropriately for the day?
Mr. Honak.
I'm 187% for this. $75,000 is 0.01%. It's fantastic. It's a lot of cluck for the buck. And when you move down to the bottom bullet point, promotes district unity and brand and positive appreciation based culture. And those are unmeasurable, and you will get back this money 100-fold, in my opinion. I'm 100%, we should just do that.
I think that's all.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we would also like the governing board to consider district provided cell phones for administrative council positions. This would allow the district to be in compliance with statute, as well as the Arizona State Board of Education guidance. This guidance was included in the agenda documents this evening. Having district provided phones without a cost to the employee will also allow the district to monitor those devices, which speaks kind of in concert with the guidance from the Arizona State Board of Education. The annual cost of providing the phones to 48 admin council positions is approximately $35,000. The reason why I bring this up for discussion today is obviously the cost of providing those phones, but also we would need to make updates to placement charts for some of our admin council positions. And that would be something we would talk about in April for governing board approval. Currently, some of our admin placement charts note a $500 salary reduction to cover the cost of a district provided phone. This clause is not currently in use, meaning not anyone has a district provided phone right now, and is not consistent on all of the admin charts. Additionally, by reducing salaries for a district provided phone, it may jeopardize the district's ability to monitor those phones. So here is a good time to take questions or feedback on the topic of district provided cell phones.
Ms. Clymer.
Your first bullet point in terms of compliance with the statute, what is the statute and what does it say exactly? I mean, are we required to provide these cell phones, or what are we out of compliance on?
So it's compliance with ARS 15203 section A 44. Essentially, it talks about how not utilizing your personal cell phone to communicate with parents and students and staff. And so right now we know, administrators have those communications because, we're oftentimes doing our jobs off hours and those types of things. And so That is what that statute covers.
Okay. And you said these are administrative positions. How many positions, and is this only people at district office, or is this administrators on campus level too?
This is administrators at district and on campus, so principals and assistant principals, 48 total positions, so or 48 devices.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Owens. Mr. Honak.
Two issues. I have a lot of phones, and I have three phones that I use personally. And I can just say, first off, $60 a month is ridiculous. I paid $20 for a month for the first one and $15 for each additional phone. I think I have a total of, I don't know how many, but I use three of them personally. But I can tell you this, it's a pain in the neck to have multiple phones. It's the most inconvenient thing in the world. So you would say, well, why do I have three? Well, because I leave one in my car so that if I forget my phone, I'm not disconnected from reality in the world. And the other phone I have for basically the same thing as a spare, because it's just cheap to have. So I don't know whether people really are going to want this. And you know, there's so many ways to block things on your phone and stuff like that. So I question the guidance or the wisdom, because the administrators that are, you know, it's just going to be a pain in the neck to just drag around two phones everywhere. And I don't think it's going to help anybody or make anybody that happy. And I think the price is really double what it at the most, maybe 3 times, 4 times what's competitive out there.
Ms. Moran.
No questions.
I don't have any questions right now.
Okay. And then the last thing we'd like to talk about is some additional stipends. So these would be stipend requests that we would bring to a future governing board meeting. There is a request that we've received by administration to add a lead school office supervisor for an annual stipend of $2,500. So this is a stipend to a current existing office supervisor to perform those duties. The description of the duties were attached to our agenda tonight so that you could see those. To highlight a few, the role would help onboard and support our new office supervisors, and it would increase consistency and compliance amongst our school office supervisor group. Additionally, the governing board was presented information last year regarding an increase to the National Board Certified Teacher Stipend to be competitive with other districts. We have provided the total annual cost to the budget to make this change. So increasing from $1,000 to $3,000, a $3,000 annual stipend would be $43,384. So what, an approximate increase about, what is that, 20,000? Doing quick math in my head. Lastly, I feel it's important to note that we are reviewing additional national board certifications that are not currently recognized with a stipend. So there are other national certifications that we do not recognize currently. So at this time, I will take any questions or feedback on these items.
Ms. Clymer.
I don't have any questions necessarily. I think these are great. I think with the knowledge that there are other national board certifications, which I agree should be recognized. I don't have any problem with that. Just looking at these numbers, I think I want to be competitive with other districts. And I know we looked at the stipends that are given across the board. There's just a little bit of hesitation in us tripling the stipend. And then we're also going to add a number of other people. I don't know what that number looks like. And so we're going to have to be similar in those stipends. We can't give national board certified teachers 3,000 and this other national certification, something different. And so My hesitation is not to give them a stipend. I think they absolutely deserve it. My hesitation is tripling it and also saying, we're also going to add other people, but we don't know how many people there are. So I'd like to see more numbers on that, I think, but in all, I'm happy with that change.
Mr. Owens.
So if you're a national board certified teacher, right now you get an extra $1,000 every year, and this is saying you get an extra 3,000 every year.
That's correct.
Do you know what it costs the teacher to get that certification? Obviously time and hours, but does it cost money, like going to get a certificate or something like that? Or is it something that you can just do?
I know that there is a cost to it. I'm sorry, I don't know that cost to. Oh, Executive Director DeCoste, do you maybe know the answer to that question?
Yeah, I don't know the exact cost, but there are costs related to it, and we can look that up and get that number to you. In addition to their time, but they have to pay to go through the program, and then they also have to pay additional money for the national board trainings and workshops that are typically held by the Arizona K-12 Center.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you could find that out, that'd be helpful, just to know exactly what their investment is. Obviously, we understand if they're nationally board certified teacher, they're technically probably going to be better at their job. So we would want to compensate them more, but I do think tripling seems kind of aggressive.
Mr. Honak.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Mr. Owen.
Ms. Moran.
No questions or comments.
So I was able to go to a training today. They had a all day thing for the teachers that are currently going through the process, and watching the work they have to go through and the hours and hours and hours of time that they're putting in that's above and beyond their teaching in the classroom and doing all the work they're doing, and watching actually was really cool because you got to see them collaborating with other teachers at other campuses, and they were learning from each other. And so it was just a really cool thing to watch. But the amount of time that they put into that, set aside their own money, is a ton, and it's over 3 years time that they have to work on it. One of the teachers today told me that basically it's like getting your master's is equivalent for her time that she's putting into it. And I think that we need to make sure we are being competitive, because I know that we pay nothing basically compared to districts that are around us. So I think that we've been given that information before of what other districts pay. So I would like to see that again, but I can go back and find that for us to see what other districts are paying, making sure that we are competitive with that, because I would hate for us to lose teachers. One of the things that we found out today too is that the retention rate for teachers that have this is significantly higher, and we will be able to continue having that higher retention rate if we are offering them a competitive stipend to other districts that are around us. So I think that this is worth the money for us to do this, because we know we're going to keep veteran teachers here. We know they are going to be better at what they're doing. They're going to bring that knowledge that they learn from their peers and from this program, and they're going to bring it back to their campuses. We see that a lot of our teachers that go this route become leaders in our district. So all those things benefit our students, which means that the money that we're paying towards it is a benefit for our students.
I think that data you're looking for is in the phase 2 of the compensation study, if I'm not mistaken, right? The comparison of what they paid out for the stipends for nationally board certified teachers. I thought it was in that compensation study that he just sent over, because he was laying out sort of the doctorate and the master's and all of those varying levels. So I could be wrong, but we should check there first, because I remember seeing that.
I believe there was a previous presentation specifically on national board certified teachers, and that data was included in there.
Yeah, and I think my thing about being aggressive is they're teachers, so they're going to get 2% already, right? And then an additional 2,000. So that's just kind of my thinking along that line.
I can answer the question now while you guys were talking. I had a chance to look back in our notes. So the full candidacy costs $1,900 per applicant. And then for each component that they do, because there are several different components, it's an additional $475. And then there's also a $75 processing fee. Now there are grants available that our teachers will pursue into trying to get that paid for, and most commonly through the Arizona K-12 Center. But if they don't have a grant for pursuing it, then it could be over $3,000, probably up to $4,000. Okay, thank you.
And Gina, this is Danielle. They have to do that every 5 years, right? For that recertification effort?
They do have to recertify, and they keep changing that. I think it is 5 years. It is less sometimes to recertify, but I'm not really positive. It's kind of like the A+ applications. They change a little bit every year. So, but yes, it's not for life. You do have to continue to keep it updated in order to qualify for it.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments on that? I think we're done.
I don't have any other questions or comments on that, but I would like to just follow up and find out when we're going to find out more information, or if that will be included in our next budget conversation about the transportation department.
Board Member Moran, so if I understand the question correctly, you are wanting some more information on the transportation department and what things we would do to address. I want to make sure I understand. Is it compensation, or is it a matter of filling those positions?
Yeah, so in the January study session, I brought up the fact that I have received personal feedback from transporters in other districts and in our own district that other districts have more hours. They have full-time bus drivers, and that is potentially one of the reasons that our positions are not filled, because similar to the aides that we have for specials, some folks need more than 30 hours a week. I understand one of the answers to that was that we have the opportunity to offer additional hours. However, I didn't hear anywhere near 40 hours a week. And I do understand that if we offer 40 hours a week, that may not be 40 hours a week of driving a bus. However, if that's going to help us fill these positions, we've had a variety of open positions, but they've hovered somewhere around 12 to 15 for the entire year. So clearly the additional funds that we allocated toward paying the hourly rate aren't working to fill those gaps. So my question is, do we need to do something like you're saying is going to happen in IT, where we have concerted recruiting efforts? Do we need to change the hours that are offered and offer more than one option for the type of position that we have for student transporters? Or is it still a matter of pay? What can we do to fill those gaps and make sure that we have adequate coverage so that our students are consistently getting to school on time?
Thank you, Board Member Moran, and that helped remind me, so I appreciate that. We are in conversation and doing research right now with other districts and ways they have solved that. So we do know there's some districts who have done what is being suggested, which is to add hours and duties to fulfill those hours to make the position 40 hours. And we've gotten some feedback already, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And so we're compiling all of that. I know Director White is working on that, and we will be having further conversation as administration and bring some recommendations. So we're just not prepared to have that conversation today.
Okay, which is fine. I asked the question to find out when that is going to be presented to us, and just to make sure that's not going to slip through the cracks during this budget conversation, during this cycle, because obviously it's likely going to impact the budget, whatever decision we decide to make on that.
So I think we could probably have that conversation in March, either if time allows, on the agenda on March 7th, or we could have that at the study session at, I think, on the 21st of March, if we have time in the agenda for that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything else? Ms. Clymer, no. Mr. Owens, no. Mr. Honak?
Nope. No.
Okay. Did you guys need anything else from us?
I don't think so, not at this time.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentations.
Yes, thank you for answering all our questions and listening to all our feedback. Next up, we are going to be going into executive session, so I'm going to need, oh, I'm sorry. Our attorney's going to talk real quick, so I'm going to let her talk.
I'm sorry to interrupt, President Zeidema and board members. Before you make your motion to go into executive session, I wanted to make the recommendation that you specify the statutory reasons for convening that executive session and that they be under 38-431-03, A3 and A4.
Okay, so we need a motion to go into executive session. The board can go into executive session under, I'm sorry, you said it's 38-431.03 for A1 and A4, right?
President Zeidema, A3 and A4.
Oh, sorry, A3 and A4, sorry, yes. So for A3 and A4. Do you need that to be in the motion or just so long as we've stated it on the
I think
record?
you stated that.
Okay.
Yeah, or
Thank
I move that pursuant to ARS 38-431-03, A3 and 4, we move into executive session.
I second.
Okay, having a first and a second, Ms. Clymer, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Ms. Moran,
Aye.
Mr. Honak,
Yay.
and I'm a yay. So we are in executive session And everybody's on there? Okay. We are going to reconvene our special meeting and adjourn the executive session. We're not going to hear me talk again? Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to our next item on the agenda.
Okay, we're on 8A, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was confused because of the two things. Okay. I move to accept the resignation of Superintendent Gunning effective June 30th of 2023 and approve the resignation agreement and release.
I second.
Having a first and a second, I will go through the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Ms. Moran.
Yay.
Hold on, I'm gonna do that again.
I'm sorry, Kim, we can't hear you. Hold just one second. Yay.
Okay, I heard you. Mr. Honak,
Yay.
and I am a yay. The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is discussion and possible action to suspend policy BEDB agenda regarding the order of business for special meetings until June 30th, 2023, in accordance with policy BGF for suspension and repeal of policy.
It hasn't popped up for me now.
So this is on the agenda for us to discuss. The policy, basically, it talks about how we, with our special meetings, we recently aligned it to our regular meetings in the fact that we have the same order. So we've got Pledge of Allegiance, moment of silent reflection, public comment. Going forward, we're going to be having a lot of executive sessions to be doing interviews for our potential new superintendents with the search firm. And so in order to just prioritize everybody's time and kind of just make that be more efficient, we would like to suspend this policy where we don't have to have all that stuff in the beginning for just those meetings where we're having executive sessions. In suspending this policy, it means we do not have to do this, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it. So when we have special meetings that are not related to this, we can still follow our same timeline. But that was just the idea of kind of saving us some time potentially going forward and our search firm and everybody else while we're moving forward through this process. Did anybody have any?
I'd like to make a motion that we suspend policy BEDB until June 30th as explained.
Okay, I have a first.
I will I have a second. I will second it, but I have a question.
Okay, question.
I do second it. I just want to confirm you used the terminology executive session and it was actually special meeting. Is that correct? This doesn't affect executive sessions.
No,
only
so the
affects
thing
special
is,
meetings.
yeah, so any executive session we have has to come from a special meeting or our regular meetings that we have. We have to call a special meeting and then go into executive session. So
Correct.
because we're going to have special meetings scheduled in the future that are only to go into executive session for
Okay.
us to do these interviews, this will just help us with like the time
Right.
commitments.
I just
around
wanted to
it.
make sure we were interchanging those words. I
Right.
was
So yeah, so
confused.
no, this is
got it.
just for our special meetings and it's only going to be applied to the meetings where we're going to have these executive sessions to do our interviews.
Okay. Okay, I am ready to vote.
Okay. Having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Aye.
Ms. Moran,
Yay.
Mr. Honak.
Yay.
I'm also a yay, so motion passes. And that is all. So if there's a,
I move to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
having a first and a second, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Mr. Honak,
Yay.
Ms. Moran.
Yay.
I'm a yay. Thank you all for coming.